So taking these ideas, then we're going to take a look at creating our first class. So I have a little piece of software here that you don't need. It's called Notepad++, and it's just that it's a nice light kind of code editor. And we're going to write down one of these classes. So we're going to take the cat that we had over here, and we're going to see if I had to create a class for this, what would it look like, and what's actually going on in the code. So I had mentioned that if we're going to create a mapping for an object, we're going to have this thing here called a class. So I actually have to start off creating one of these. So I can say class, and we'll call it cat. Okay, I'm going to notice that it's highlighted here because class is a keyword, and we're going to see it differently when we use Visual Studio and Unity. But the idea here is simple. We have defined a class called cat. And we'll notice that I've put two curly braces in here then as well. Well, that's to signify that anything in between these two is now part of the cat. Okay, so when that goes in here is now part of that cat, and they're required. You can't have one without the other. If you take it out, it won't compile, and you'll get errors as well when we see it in Unity. So I'm going to have this class called cat. Let's take a look at the data that we want to kind of store here. So weight, breed, location, and color. Now I said that these need to be stored in variables that have data types, and there's something crazy about doing this. There's a load of different data types. We're going to see them when we go into Visual Studio properly. But if I want to look, for instance, at weight here, breed, location, and color. So for the weight, we can have two choices. We could have an int, okay, which are whole numbers. So I could say weight, and that would be something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 actual whole numbers, no decimal points here, no fractions involved whatsoever. So it's not particularly that accurate. So I might change that to be something that we're going to see inside the game, which is a floating point number. So this does have decimals. I'm going to do 1.256, something like that. We might have a breed. Now this can be represented in many different ways, but one that we're going to be interested in, maybe we're just going to store it as a piece of text, something that somebody could just type in or pick from a list. Text will be represented as what we call a string. And to input a string, we put it inside double quotes here. Now I don't know any cat breeds, I don't think. So it's going to be street cat. Along with this, there's also a character. So if you wanted to put in a single character, it would be just our single quotes like this. And then you can put whatever you like inside there. So we want to note a few things as I've been writing quite a bit here is the declaration of these guys is always the same. So we have our data type. We have a name, a unique name at that within that class. You can have the same name in different classes, but in the one class we can't have two guys called weight. They have to be spelt differently. So I have my data type, I have my name, so data type, I have my name. We then have this optional little bit here. We don't have to do this at the very, very start. This is an assignment. So the equals means I am storing whatever's on the right-hand side of this in that variable. So you can say data type name is equals to whatever data you're trying to put in there. And then every single line of code in C# is ended with a semicolon. Okay, that's just to indicate, hey, this is the end of it. So we don't need that character here whatsoever, but just to note, we have float for floating point numbers. We have string here for text. We're not going to use char at all, but we might have, say, location. And in Unity, we're going to see a guy called a vector3, and it's not going to show up here because it doesn't exist. But we'll have a guy called a vector3, and that might store our location. We'd also have a color then as well, which won't show up here. And we can say that would be the data for our cats. This would be our variables kind of defined. So key thing to note, data type, name, an optional assignment. These can be assigned later on if we want. I'm going to see that in Unity. So that would be our data. And if we want to see like our actions that we're going to have, or more commonly known as methods. And these are kind of similar. So the kind of format for these guys would be a return type. So if I call this action, am I expecting some sort of data to come back to me? So if I go, hey, what is the breed of the cat? we have an action called get breathe. It's going to have to return back to me some sort of information for that. So I'm going to have a return type. Again, I'm going to have a unique name that's going to be used, and then we're going to have possible, or optional parameters. So let's think about writing this. So if my return type, if I don't want to return anything, okay, you're just going to call this method, it's going to do something, and that's it. I will put in void. That's it. And most of the methods you're going to see are probably going to be void. We then need a name, so maybe it's meow. We could have optional parameters. So void meow, open my round brackets. This is where I get to put my parameters. Now, if I'm not going to have any parameters that are all passed in here, I would just close it off. And you notice I put in 2 curly braces as well here. And the reason for doing that is that this is a reusable block of code. It's an action. It does one thing, and it can be done many times. So we put its own little block of code inside the class. So we're going to notice the 2 curlies, the start and the end of it. And anything that is inside those 2 brackets are then considered to be part of the meow method. So every time I call meow, it does whatever code is in here. So make sound or something. Now you could have optional parameters in here. So if I don't want to have any information passed in, so if you were to call meow method, you wouldn't have to provide any information, but maybe we could have something like the length of time. So float time. How long is it going to be? How long is the cat going to meow for? Or you could have the volume and that kind of stuff to kind of set that out, depending on whatever you want. And we're going to see a lot of these inside in Unity. So we're going to be using their code to build our game in on top of it. So they're going to have parameters set up that we're going to have to provide, and sometimes it's going to look a little bit crazy because there's going to be loads of them, or there's going to be like really long blocks of code. But I'll do my best to explain what it is. It's usually, it's always going to be a class. So you're always going to have an object of cat, game object, whatever it's going to be, and then those guys are going to have properties or data, basically the variables that we can see and the methods that we can call. So that'll be your introduction to C#, really. Extremely quick, but if you got the idea that we have classes that represent objects, variables to store data, and methods that perform actions, then you're absolutely perfect.